before the world was always online, before friendships had a status, before news traveled faster than truth, there was a quiet frustration humming beneath modern life. People were connected by cables and screens, but not really connected. The internet was a library, a marketplace, a collection of anonymous usernames drifting past each other. You could read almost anything. You could buy almost anything. But knowing people, really knowing them, still happened offline. Faces were separate from screens. Identity was optional. And the idea that your real-life relationships could live, breathe, and grow on the internet felt unnecessary. Maybe even dangerous. That was the assumption of the time. And it's the assumption Mark Zuckerberg would quietly tear apart. This is not the story of a billionaire or a company. It's the story of a mindset that refused to accept how things were supposed to be and instead asked a different question. What if the internet wasn't just about information? What if it was about people? Mark Zuckerberg grew up surrounded by systems, music systems, computer systems, communication systems. From an early age, he was less interested in using tools than understanding how they worked and how they could work better. While other kids played games, Mark built them. While others followed rules, he looked for the logic behind them. He wasn't driven by status or applause. He was driven by curiosity, a need to see patterns. A quiet belief that if something felt inefficient, it probably was. This mindset mattered because innovation doesn't begin with ambition, it begins with irritation. Mark noticed something most people accepted without question. Social life was fragmented. Your school life lived in one place, your family life in another. Your interests somewhere else entirely. The internet, instead of uniting these pieces, kept them apart. Online spaces encouraged masks, fake names, highlight reels, or complete anonymity. The assumption was simple. Privacy required distance. Real identity didn't belong online. But what if that assumption was wrong? What if being real, being yourself, was actually the missing ingredient? The breakthrough didn't arrive as a grand vision to change the world. It arrived as a small experiment, simple idea born from observation. People are naturally curious about each other. They want to see faces, make connections, feel included, not globally, locally, not everyone, just the people who matter. Mark didn't start by trying to connect the world. He started by connecting a campus. The idea was almost obvious in hindsight, which is usually the mark of something powerful. A digital space where real people used real names to connect with people they already knew. No personas, no masks, just identity, mirrored online. At the time, this felt limiting. Why build something that only worked for a small group? Why restrict access? Why tie the internet to real life when anonymity gave freedom? This was the first major challenge to conventional thinking. Mark believed that trust grows from authenticity, that networks are strongest when they reflect reality instead of replacing it. But people don't want infinite connections, they want meaningful ones. The early version wasn't polished. It wasn't perfect. But it spread not through advertising, but through gravity. People invited others because it felt useful, familiar, almost inevitable. Still, success didn't mean acceptance. Skepticism followed quickly. Critics dismissed it as a toy, fad, a temporary obsession for students with too much time. Others questioned the idea of putting real identity online at all. Would people really share their lives publicly? Would they trust a platform with their personal connections? And then came the harder obstacles. Rapid growth brought pressure. Technical failures, scaling problems, ethical questions, legal disputes, public scrutiny. Every assumption Mark challenged came back amplified, about privacy, about power, about control. And through it all, one criticism echoed louder than the rest. This is irresponsible. But it's the thing about innovation that truly changes the world. It forces society to confront trade-offs it didn't know it was making. Facebook Simple at its core worked differently because it treated relationships as infrastructure. It didn't just host content. It mapped human connection. Instead of asking, what do you want to post? It asked, who do you know? Instead of anonymity, it offered continuity. Instead of forums, it offered feeds. Instead of isolated pages, it created a living network where every action, liking, sharing, commenting, strengthened invisible threads between people. This was the real innovation. It's not a website, but a social graph. And once that graph existed, everything changed. News didn't just spread, it traveled through trust. Businesses didn't just advertise, they targeted communities. Movements didn't just shout, they organized. Families stayed connected across borders. Old friends reappeared. Voices that once had no platform suddenly had one. The internet stopped being a place you visited, became a place you lived. Of course, impact cuts both ways. The same system that amplified connection also amplified division. It's the same tools that built communities could isolate them. The same speed that spread truth could spread misinformation. Mark Zuckerberg didn't just build a product, he helped unlock a force. And like all forces, it demanded responsibility, reflection, and evolution. The world argued about Facebook because it mattered. And that's often how you know something has changed the game. Through criticism, Mark held on to a core belief that connecting people deeply and authentically was worth the risk, that problems should be addressed, not avoided, that progress is messy, but stagnation is worse. He continued to challenge assumptions, that platforms should stay small, that technology should avoid social complexity, the human connection couldn't be engineered. Instead, he leaned into them. The broader impact of this mindset now surrounds us. Social platforms define how culture moves, how ideas spread, how relationships form. Entire industries, media, marketing, politics, were reshaped around the idea that connection is currency. Whether celebrated or criticized, the shift is undeniable. And it all began with a question most people never thought to ask. What if the internet reflected who we really are? Mark Zuckerberg's story still matters today because innovation isn't about having the loudest voice or the biggest vision. It's about seeing the invisible limits everyone else accepts and quietly stepping beyond them. It's about building not for attention, but for usefulness. Not for everyone, but for the right people. And trusting that if something solves a real human problem, it will grow. The lesson isn't to copy the product. The lesson is to copy the courage. To question the assumptions of your time. To build simply. To think long-term. And to understand that the most powerful ideas don't just change industries. They change how people relate to each other. That's why this story isn't finished. Because the future will always belong to those willing to ask, what if the world could work differently?